Hello and welcome everybody, I'm Bavarian, and today we have Dev Diary number 157, I Will Die on This Hill. In this Dev Diary we'll be talking a lot about hills and a potentially rather gimmicky mechanic that I want your opinions on, related to Montenegro. It's all interesting, but at the end of the day we should evaluate it. Now I do want to know, what kind of hills are you folks willing to die on? For me, for example, I am willing to die on the hill that I'm boycotting McDonald's because they have raised the price of a cheeseburger in Germany up to $2.67. That is an outrageous price for what is now also a smaller cheeseburger. Anyway, when I go to Sweden in the year 2025, I can buy a cheeseburger for $1.15. Think about that, it's insane. I will die on that hill. Anyway, let's talk about a hill that is called the Black Mountain of Montenegro. We've sensed, even up here in our lofty Wizards Tower, a general desire to add more variety to the way different countries play in Victoria 3. The Montenegrin campaign is an experiment designed both to represent the country's vibrant and violent history and to provide a particularly unique experience. Again, I understand what they're doing here and I think it is a good idea. I'm just curious whether you think it is gimmicky, whether this is actually going to facilitate playthroughs that are interesting. And as always on this channel, keep in mind, can the AI interact with this? Will the AI be able to do things? Those are the questions that I have for this Dev Diary. We selected Montenegro with the hope there will be something satisfying about climbing from such extremely humble beginnings towards a great modern nation. You begin in dire straits, the treasury draining fast, a measly 2 spare units of arable land, that is literally nothing, and a woefully low standard of living. As in history, women are working the fields, we already talked about this, so that more men can fight, but during peacetime this leaves a huge number of not strictly employed men eating away at resources. Starvation is put off by aid from Russia, delivered through the Austrian port by the coast. The literacy rate in-game is 0.6%. This is likely above the historical figure, as the Njegos family personally educated a small clique, while they themselves were educated abroad, so there was no kind of education system internally. Peter II, or Petar II, acquired the nation's first modern printing press in the 1830s, which he used to print his own poetry and possibly the Bible. Times are hard. There will be no spamming iron mines until you pass laissez-faire. There are, however, a few modifiers and law variants that may help you survive. Please note, as always, that the exact numbers may change before release. So, obviously awful statistics, this is basically not a country. They talked about this as well, and they are going to talk about this. The history of Montenegro right here is one where effectively you are just a couple of people in the hills and the mountains that are too kind of atrocious, that are too difficult to administer and to tax, so that you get some liberty, some freedom there, that then justifies this actually becoming a country, becoming a state, and indeed quite possibly joining Serbia. Prince Bishop Petar II Petrovic Njegos seeks to forge a nation out of the tribe on the rebellious Black Mountain. Right, so he is a Prince Bishop, although he doesn't want to be. As you can see, we start with some interesting views on tax collection. Let's see, while the Women in the Fields law is active, Montenegro will have more soldiers and workers available, but its people will suffer. You gain raider economy, decaying for 50 years, which means gold reserve limit goes up, institution size change speed goes up as well, military wages down, wealth and education access goes down, also even the priests are literate, that is most certainly a modifier. You're not minting anything either, and yeah, the consumption tax cost goes up by plus 200%, so you probably want to be spending that authority on something else. Yeah. Those are modifiers that again change this away from the functioning gameplay systems that exist in the game, because the country would be non-viable, and they really don't depict the country all that well, I think. This means that you have to engage with the gimmicky system behind it. Now, I want to stress, when I say gimmicky, I don't mean to kind of devalue or judge it. I mean to say that it doesn't fit into the general mold of the general mechanics. We're going to see how that plays out. Now, we already looked at this. These are not modifiers that are new to us. We talked about the Seth paternalism and women in the fields as is. This is something, if I'm not mistaken, that will be in 1.10 for free, but obviously it plays a bigger role in the content to come. As far as the Ottoman Empire was concerned, Montenegro was not an independent state but a Christian group, practicing religious freedom on top of the mountain, with a habit of killing tax collectors to the point where it was simply easier for everyone involved to stop sending them. This was why Montenegrin rulers were given the title Prince Bishop, and since bishops cannot marry, rule tended to be handed down to a convenient nephew rather than a son. Which, by the way, I really want to stress this, the way that it is in the modern day when it comes to the church, to bishops and so on, that is not the standard in any part of the Catholic, or I guess even the Protestant church, although it is a bit different in the Protestant church anyway, right? The Orthodox, the Catholic church, whenever you have land that can be quasi-owned, whether it is legally the case or whether it is just de facto, so, well, you will have somebody that gets a convenient person show up that is like, yep, this is just, let's make this guy the next bishop, and it is a family member, maybe a direct descendant. You get what I'm saying right there. So this isn't that unique. That is pretty much how that worked anyway, especially, for example, in the Holy Roman Empire. The Montenegrins, however, saw themselves as an independent Serbian state, so that is the self-perception. With little arable land, they were forced to raid to survive. There was a tradition of headhunting, literally collecting the heads of Ottomans they killed in battle as trophies. To be fair, the Ottoman Pasha on the other side instructed his men to do the same. When some do-gooder Westerner came in to try and talk both sides out of the practice, each side replied they would love to stop cutting off heads, but they could only consider it if their enemy stopped first. So the violence continued, yeah. A classic, of course, nobody really wants to give in. The Ottoman Empire has a lot to lose, because once they actually were to go, yes, you can carve minorities out of an empire, well, it will never stop, and that is, of course, what happened historically as well. These constant raids should have given the Ottomans an excuse to invade and end the rebels once and for all, but the great powers, particularly Russia, were protective of their fellow Christians. It was thus Montenegro's small size that allowed them to raid the Ottomans without facing oblivion. In a century when such antiquated violence within Europe would normally have escalated into a full-scale war or a multinational diplomatic crisis, the great powers insisted on guaranteeing Montenegro's independence. Meanwhile, the raids were not impactful enough on the greater empire for the Sublime Porte to justify disregarding Russia's request and exterminating the Christians on the hill. I asked in the past, what should be the reason that Montenegro can simply exist in this context, in this playthrough, in a campaign like this? And the answer obviously is that Russia is actually guaranteeing their independence. So that is exactly why the Ottomans aren't just clamping down on it in terms of gameplay. For all their support, the great powers still made it clear they would really appreciate if Montenegro would behave themselves and shape up into something that looked like a modern state. To this end, the Montenegrin campaign is defined by two journal entries, one about earning the respect of the great powers, including transitioning into a formal monarchy, the other about raiding and pillaging Ottoman lands, preferably until the empire is entirely destroyed. The player must balance the nation's future between these two paths. So I find these interesting. Again, the raiding mechanic is primarily working with this, right? The way that you push this up then shows that you're earning more raiding. You're getting this directly, I think, from the Ottoman budget, right? So this flows into your budget. Whereas this right here is something you want to pursue because this gives you money from the Russians. However, and I'm not sure whether they show it right here. I think they show it slightly later. Yeah, raiding, before we get back to this screen right there, you can see it right there, goes up to plus 5,000, right? So this is a pretty high number, whereas actually getting benefits from the Russians goes up all the way to 1,000. So this is the maximum amount that you can get there, or the base amount, I suppose. Which means raiding, quite frankly, is more profitable, so you have no reason to fully stop it. You just want to balance it so that the Russians don't get very angry with you, and you lose all that money and the guarantee, of course, right there. Now, from rebels to nation is, of course, something you want to look into. You want to become a real country, ultimately. Any taxation law other than consumption-based, right? Has any policing law, has enacted any variant of monarchy, so you cannot remain a prince-bishopric, because that is kind of just like... It's not like that is really the state of affairs in your country. It's just, you know, kind of the on top of that layer that you put on there to get some legitimacy. You also need to be legitimate, and you need to build the Biljada. I don't know what that is. Free Mountain indefinitely, which gives you prestige and improved relation speed. Right, that's fine. It will fail if you become a subject, or indeed if the relations with Russia break down. So this, you cannot have them break down. This is the way it is. Nonetheless, you want a lot of money. You want raiding fervor. Let's take a look at this right here. Raiding is income derived from the theft, pillage and plunder of neighboring lands over time. With little arable land, Montenegro must rely on raiding and Russian aid to survive. Our income from raiding is dependent on our raiding fervor, multiplied by our army's power projection. Plus 5,000 is the most we can possibly earn from raiding. Right, when we take a look at this is military wages go down so you can afford more. You want very kind of bad troops, although then again, if you upgraded, if you were able to get the weapons, right, the guns into your market, you could maintain this and your actual power projection would go up quite a bit. Interesting. Raiding fervor represents how often the tribes are permitted to raid. In addition to increasing our income from raiding, each 1% of raiding fervor will also have the following effects. Damage relation speed up, improve relation speed down, legitimacy, legitimacy down. That is crazy. Okay, so there is effectively a minigame here. I really want to stress this. This is not happening within the general mechanics of Victoria 3. If you have very low legitimacy, that will mean that you cannot finish this one, which means you need to stop raiding, which will impact your budget, of course, if you actually want to close out this journal entry right there. Not that the benefit from the journal entry is that great, although The great powers will negotiate with the Ottoman Empire to give us more land, though we may have to stop raiding. This is how you get the coastline, right? So you kind of want to determine for how long you want to be raiding, why you are doing the raiding, and then to transition into a real country so that you can sooner rather than later join up with Serbia. Russian aid is support from Russia to our tribes, as fellow brethren of the Orthodox Church. Right, this is the money that you can get. Visit Moscow. The Prince Bishop will visit Russia to improve relations and petition further support for our cause. We will not be able to pass any laws while he is away. Radicals from political movements disallow enacting laws. That doesn't really matter. I feel like this doesn't really matter. What kind of laws are you passing anyway? Canonize ancestor. If we canonize an ancestor, so let's see the loop right here. You start out, you raid like crazy, your legitimacy goes down. This benefit will give you legitimacy back, which means you can raid even more. You lose a lot of money, but indeed this makes something work there. I can see the loop for sure, but I will also say, like, okay, raiding sounds nice, but there's not that much that I can build anyway. So realistically speaking, I just want to build up bank and then immediately transition into a proper state so that I get a coastline, so that I can go to war against the Ottomans and actually facilitate something there. I wonder how long this raiding period is. I will say, the longer we kind of talk about this, the more do I gain the confidence in this system, mostly because there isn't really any other alternative to having Montenegro be fun. Because you will have to be waiting decades and decades and decades of being a very tiny country, right? This makes it so that having some type of minigame is totally acceptable, because there is no other game to be played. Try to stop raiding too early and one's nation will quickly go bankrupt or starve. Raid too aggressively and not only will legitimacy drop to the point of being unable to pass laws, but one's relations may decrease with the great powers until one fails the rebels to nation journal entry, leaving no ally to guarantee Montenegro's independence against Ottoman invasion. My big question is, can the AI handle this? If they have good decision-making ability, because this is all in the script of when you take a decision, when you click this button, this shouldn't be too difficult. However, are they going to have decent script? I don't know. This is heavy script reliant. There's no way around it. Montenegro's violent and aggressive reputation has forced the great powers to withdraw their support. It now must rely on its own strength in forming a Serbian nation. Ooh, we could also kind of work with Austria, so we can do this, and there is then still a route where we could ask Austria to give us that port. So even if you ruin your relations with everybody else, as long as Austria likes you, you could make it interesting. Along the journey towards civility, you may need the landowners for once in order to pass a monarchy. A chain of historical events can also help you along the way, as Prince Danilo makes it very clear he has no intention of becoming a bishop, and every intention of establishing himself as a monarch. Danilo Petrovic Njegoš wishes to be known as a monarch, but the Orthodox Church insists on calling him a bishop. He wonders how to best prove them wrong. I like the outfits. Next week, by the way, Art Dev Diary. I am so stoked. I want to see all of the Balkan assets. They looked great in the screenshots that we have seen. Both the clothes, of course, but also everything related to the buildings. It looked nice. Danilo really was confronted with the need to marry to prove he was certainly not a bishop and therefore a prince, and therefore Montenegro was a state, and therefore it deserved land and protection. Darinka, though ostensibly not as wealthy nor carrying a high title compared to his other prospects, had the closest family ties to Montenegro, and perhaps love had something to do with this choice as well. Darinka Kverkic from Trieste for love. Okay, interesting. Trieste, that's pretty far away. However you navigate Montenegro's precarious situations, should you succeed in following the Njegoš footsteps in establishing Montenegro as a state, the great powers will reward you with the land necessary to cease raiding and establish a functioning economy if you put down the rifle and stop raiding. I would really like it, yes. Feel free to trick them and continue raiding anyway, but no, you will likely use your only ally against the Ottomans should they come knocking. I would love, and I know this is a huge meme, this is complete nonsense, if I could just be a raiding world power, just as Montenegro. You know, becoming Yugoslavia, I conquer all the Balkans and I'm still raiding and I'm capturing Germans and Hungarians everywhere. It would be kind of funny, that's all I'm saying. A new life. The great powers have negotiated for the Ottoman Empire to return some of our homelands to us if we agree to stop raiding. Take the deal, death before peace, or sure, we will totally stop raiding. I see what they're doing. Take the deal. Montenegro receives 2 provinces in Montenegro. We agree to stop raiding, reducing our income by minus 1,181. And as a replacement for Russian aid, Russia will finance the foundation of our state treasury, permanently granting us 1,000 bucks from minting. Okay, this is a good deal. This is a really good deal, quite frankly. Death before peace, interesting, but this doesn't seem good. This seems pretty bad. I don't know why I would ever choose this option. You could of course take the land and keep raiding, but Russia will no longer guarantee your independence. I think this could be feasible. I think you can make this happening, but honestly, this seems so beneficial. Like the permanent 1000 from minting plus Russian support, it just seems really good. It's indefinite benefits, basically. If you intend to lay down the sword, you will likely be desirous of a port to access the wonders of the world market. Here, you may succeed where the Nyegos family failed. By convincing Austria you are trustworthy, certainly not a Russian puppet, and that there is no risk of giving Russia access to the Mediterranean, they may return the port of Kotor to you and demonstrate the same good sportsmanship they demanded from the Ottomans in recognizing you as a state. Interesting. So, go with the Russians, go with the Austrians. Although I will tell you, going with the Austrians seems very temporary, because any ambition that you have in the Balkans will eventually clash with the Austrians. This is just true. But getting land, I guess it's not that bad. Austria concedes that it holds coastal lands that are rightfully ours. However, it is adamant about keeping Russian influence out of the Mediterranean. So what do I need to do to complete this? Legitimacy is high. Oh, so I need to have bad relations with Russia. Oof, yeah, I'm not so... That's kind of weird. How else could I get this? Alternatively, if you're on the same power block, a subject, right, classic stuff. Yeah, I'm gonna tell you. I'm not so sure that you want to pursue this, right? Because you will want to go against Austria eventually. Maybe you can very quickly, very kind of temporarily dip into Russia hating you, but in general, this doesn't seem that attractive. What if I don't do this? You may be able to complete the last of Petar and Danilo's Nyegos ambitions. These men always saw themselves as Serbians. Indeed, Petar II's poetry speaks highly of the heroic deeds of Serbian knights at the Battle of Kosovo, from which legend says all Christian Montenegro is descended. Should both states be free from the Ottoman subjugation and share a common border, the great Serbian nation can unite once again. So, let's say I don't do this. Let's say I don't go with the Austrians. This clearly is the route that you want to take, and then you can just go against the Austrians, right? Let's see. The people of Montenegro have always been seen themselves as Serbs. If I belongs to Serbia, a neighboring state, right? Serbia is not a subject of another nation, so this must be very early on. If completed, Montenegro and Serbia will have an opportunity to unite into a single nation. We will have a choice which nation's laws and leaders to adopt. Right, Serbia is not a subject of another nation. Serbia is at war with Montenegro. I get it, so this is a gimme. You have to, if you play Montenegro, you have to pursue this. Let's be honest here. It would be kind of interesting to have a different perspective, but it's not really history at that point, it's just random stuff. On unification, there are options as to which nation's rulers and laws should take precedence. I do like this. Obviously, it's not really realistic that Montenegro's laws take precedent, but gameplay-wise, this will feel very good. With a shared border, our free states have the opportunity to reunite the Serbian people into a single nation. We're Montenegro, we're Serbia, we're Serbia and Montenegro, or one people, two states. Interesting. I like all of these options. Obviously, you're going to choose the strongest one as a player no matter what. From there is no limit to the ambitions of the Nyegos family, perhaps all the way past the Eastern Crisis and Balkan Wars to forming Yugoslavia, now a major unification. Yeah, you can see this right here. This is what I'm thinking, right? There's basically no way that I will want to go against Russia, which means you probably will be grabbing something in the eventual war against the Ottomans here, and then you can unify, and then you can turn around and take bit by bit from all people around you. I do really like, just to be clear here, I love the fact that Yugoslavia is now a major formation. Having a unification play, being able to form it via something that goes beyond just clicking the button, rather there are these supporting mechanisms. If anything, this being a major unification works way better than Germany and Italy being a unification that is a major one. Obviously, they are major unification for a reason, Germany and Italy, but there are issues with the system that this nation won't really be facing. This one, yeah, you just get some support in actually facilitating this. I like it a lot. Montenegro was just the first of our Balkan hills to die upon. Let us have a quick look at what happens if you start the game as their Serbian kin, under the houses of Karadovic and Obrenovic. I definitely, sorry for butchering this, I'm doing my best. Serbia, Serbia, Serbia. Our next hill to die upon is Dedinje in Belgrade, where the it's Karađorđević. I see how it is. Gotcha. This family established their royal residence after taking power from the Obrenovic dynasty, who had resided in Topčeda Park at the bottom of the hill. The struggle between the two dynasties is represented by the Throne of Thorns journal entry. The current ruler may launch a campaign to build up support, offering various incentives to communities or interest groups in return for their loyalty. We are getting a kind of internal minigame that is fine. I will tell you right now, I like the way that divided monarchies for France works, but the reality of the Victoria 3 interest group system is that you cannot have something that is that well rooted in the actual mechanics, so we're talking about how many barracks do you have, how happy is the army, yada yada yada, in a small nation. In small nations, interest group alignments and strengths can change in a heartbeat. It literally takes seconds, and then it is done. Making it so, having a different minigame that goes a little bit more into, hey, here's some flavor, and that is how you build the nation, makes a lot more sense. I am on board with this. I will also say in relation to Montenegro, I think it's really interesting. I think there's something happening there. I just need to see the off-roads in action, or the off-ramps in action. How do you stop being a raiding nation? How do you make that decision? How informed and how easily can you read how informed you are? Can you make that decision? The scale of power shifts between the Karađorđević and the ruling Obrenović families. Allegiances have been promised left and right, without much thought. Who is the rightful ruler of Serbia? The price of loyalty is ever-changing, right? This makes it so that you can slander the rival dynasty and or launch a campaign. If dynastic loyalty reaches 0%, our ruler and their dynasty will be overthrown and replaced by a member of the House of Karađorđević. I assume once that happens, is the event here to stay? Does it just close it out? So either you are Obrenović or you overthrow yourself basically and you become Karađorđević. Okay, interesting. The House of Obrenović is one of the two contending Serb royal houses. They are descended from Miloš Obrenović, leader of the Second Serbian Uprising and founder of the Autonomous Principality of Serbia. Supporters of the Obrenović typically favor improved relations with Austria. Okay, so in short, I will want the Karađorđević. They are descended from Karađorđe, leader of the ill-fated First Serbian Uprising against the Ottoman Empire. Okay, so both of them clearly have a pretty considerable claim to fame. Makes a lot of sense, but I will probably be going with the people that support Russia, because Russia doesn't hold any land where I am, and I can just go on and claim all of the Ottoman, all of the Balkans, all of course, the Austrian possessions as well. Should the country fall in hard times, the other dynasty may sweep away support. See, they say the other dynasty does this. Oh, so you get swept out, and then you still have to launch campaigns as Karađorđević, and then you reach 100%. So there is a chance for them to come back. Initially, you probably want this to run down to 0, then you come back and you just launch campaign after campaign after campaign until you get to 100%. The following conditions will advance dynastic loyalty. High ruler popularity, low popularity of rival claimants, legitimacy, everything. Okay, so the happier people are, the more independent you are, the more important you are, and of course whether you can suppress them, the more will you succeed. Makes perfect sense. These are all reasonable kind of approaches. I will also say, basing this not on buildings and the way this goes, I think is very smart. The way what they're basing it on is something that even small nations, you know, aren't really just kind of like mana in. Like, this stuff isn't just mana for them, the same way that, for example, I can turn cloud directly into something that just is completely different the other day. I remember I was playing Kafiristan, and it is so small, of course, that within seconds I could flip everything related to interest group cloud, which in this case doesn't really make a lot of sense. You can see right here they mostly work with approval rather than with direct cloud, so I think they're kind of in the know when it comes to the game mechanics. I like that a lot. Should one house lose control, the other begins their own similar version of the journal entries, so power can change hands a series of times until someone finally gets dynastic loyalty to 100% and cements their power. I like this, that's cool. What does launching a campaign actually do? Serbia gets forced campaign indefinitely, authority, landowner's approval, moderate campaign fund indefinitely, right? Chosen level of expense will determine the effectiveness of investments to visited states and our popularity for years to come. So this makes it so that we can push this further and actually cement us, but it comes at a pretty significant cost. Alternatively, if we have paper mills, that is an interesting. Actually requiring a building is interesting, but if we have this, we can trigger the event slander pamphlets, which brings down popularity, that naturally brings down dynastic loyalty, and then additionally, well, it brings it up, I should say, and additionally makes it so that long-term it will be going up faster as well. Now, they do also, of course, have some supporting events related to this. Renegade Hajduks, irregular troops under the command of Alexander Karađorđević, have been harassing Sunni and Jewish neighborhoods. You know how they are, my prince. They used to enjoy raiding Ottoman trade caravans and aristocrats, but all they have left now are peasants without anyone to protect them. The advisor shoot the messenger with a swift gesture before proceeding. Karađorđe was one of them during the years of rebellion. Now his son is trying to keep his father's friends happy. I will tell you, I like this flavor. I think the writing is nice. This piece of art is a great piece of art, but keep this in your mind because you're going to be seeing this a lot. I wish they had other raiding art pieces as well, just because of how much raiding everybody is doing. I think we're going to be seeing this quite a lot. You also have the church, of course, getting involved in this classic flavor right there. After dealing with this domestic strife, Serbia can particularly benefit from the recent changes to Liberty desire to seek its independence. Building a large army can give a significant boost, though with the Ottomans having so many troops, perhaps it may be best to use the support separatism diplomatic interaction covered in Devdari 154 to inspire a Serbian movement within Ottoman territory, sparking the Eastern Crisis. So the mechanical implementation of minorities really facilitates this here. We have, for Serbia and Montenegro, I think, a set of mini-games that are not exactly disconnected from what is going on mechanically, like on a deeper systemic level. But then what actually feeds into your play post this initial kind of intermezzo is everything going on the mechanical level that has been changed for National Awakening. I will be honest with you, what they are doing here, I'm a big fan of. I have to see the minigames, whether I want to play them several times, whether it's interesting enough. For example, quite frankly, when I look at Brazil, I say to myself, what we do there journal entry-wise, I want to see the other side of the coin as well. There's so much happening there that is really interesting. With this, I'm a bit more skeptical. Admittedly, again, these are tiny countries. They barely function like a real normal country in Victoria 3, but the idea here kind of being, alright, I want to see where this is going. It seems at the very least very nicely embedded on what is happening underneath on a systemic level. Now we come to a really interesting topic going forward here. I like it as well. I think they already of course talked about the stuff that goes on with the Megali idea and how you can expand on this in the free content for 1.10. This right here is about the Greek Bavarocracy. The next hill to die upon is Lycabettus Hill, Athens, overlooking the palace of King Otto, the promontory of Bavarian pride in Greece. It is, of course, it has to be said, he was a very proud Bavarian, although his personal story, I mean, as disastrous as his reign was always tied to Greece without a doubt. Rejoice, Bavarians, and indeed we are rejoicing. Coming along with National Awakening is also a brand new starting journal entry for Greece, Bavarocracy. This journal entry models the highly contentious rule of Otto, the young and only, spoiler alert, Bavarian king of Greece. The king and the Bavarian clique surrounding him assumed the rule of Greece in 1832, following the successful Greek War of Independence against the Ottomans. They largely did that, they largely got this because the Bavarian, like the Wittelsbachers, were incredibly Greek obsessed. They do talk about this as well. It is this kind of idealizing Greek obsession, but I do want to remind you that Bavaria in German is called Bayern with a Y, specifically because the Y, you know, the Greek connection. They were big fans. Otto was not the first pick of the great powers for the post. That honor would belong to the later king of Belgium, Leopold I, nor was he the Greek choice, as the Greeks were not even consulted on the matter. But he was judged to be sufficiently disconnected from great power rivalries to be an acceptable candidate for the throne, and thus assumed the throne of Greece at the grand old age of 17. Convert to Eastern Orthodoxy, yep, that would be a big one if that were to happen. At least one of these, Greek has enacted any variant of autocracy, investment level of home affairs is greater or equal to 1. This nation allows for voting in elections, so it's one or the other. You either turn into a massive autocracy or you modernize. I think this one is the more difficult one, but the better one for your playthrough, I think, altogether. And Greece legitimacy is greater or equal to 75, and Bavarocratic ire is below 10, so the Greeks need to be happy. If completed, triggers the event Civilizer King of the Hellenes, or if you fail, well, you know what will be happening, the downfall of King Otto right there. Initially a somewhat popular monarch, the devoutly Catholic Otto was quickly viewed with skepticism by his more devout Orthodox subjects, after it became clear he had no intention of converting. Like many contemporary Philhellenes, he seemed more interested in the activities and the ideas of the Greeks of antiquity than those of his actual subjects, and his over-reliance on Bavarian aides and ministers did little to endear him in the hearts of native Greeks. Yeah, this is the disconnect without a doubt, that then whenever he would leave Greece would spark, upheaval. The authoritarian rule of the Bavarians in Greece would eventually lead to much unrest and a few uprisings, and even the establishment of a constitutional monarchy in 1843 would not be enough to save the king, who would be ousted from the throne some 2 decades later. The journal entry will allow you to either let history play out in a somewhat historical fashion, with Otto being deposed and replaced by a Dane, or explore alt history scenarios like Otto clinging onto power, other candidates assuming the throne, or the early rise of a republic. Let's take a look at Bavarocratic ire. We want to see what advances it, so this makes the Greeks angry. If you lose wars, if you have certain events or buttons, indeed, radicals in own Greek, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Fielding less than 10 battalions, not having voting rights, so liberalizing, turning Orthodox, being married, being an adequate ruler for Greeks rather than that will stop it from advancing. And then, of course, we have depleting it as well, owning Greek homeland states, loyalists and owned Greek homeland states having recently won a war, at least one university, battalions, and so on. Okay, I get what's happening here. While securing Othonian rule over the country will not be an easy task, there are steps you can take to facilitate it. Securing the loyalty of the Klebs or enrolling them into the army and doing your best to realize the so-called Megali idea will work wonders in terms of ensuring the stability of Otto's rule. While entrenching Othonian rule in Greece will hold rewards of its own, arranging for his downfall may prove advantageous to the country in the long run. Take a look at this right here. Bavarocracy, possible effects. If you have autocracy, you will lose an experienced and political appointee. You get Hellenic order, you get Hellenic freedoms, so this depends on how free or how autocratic you are. And you can choose Renaissance and he will gain a root. I personally don't really care about the personal modifiers because eventually he will be gone. Obviously, it does mean something here. In particular, to be fair, the offensive planner here seems pretty good. But okay, so I get what's happening here. These are minor things that will kind of throw you forward as you continue onwards onto, you know, the onslaught of the Megali idea. This will, of course, be your playthrough, basically. France, Great Britain, or Russia owing us an obligation will cause them to ignore the stipulations of the London Conference of 1832 and allow us to elect one of their princes as king of the Hellenes. Oh, that is interesting. Oh, and they give you certain reasons depending on what ideology you want. Well, France honestly has the worst ones. I think British, Danish is good. Russian, these are not that great. I will say Danish and British seem pretty decent. Okay, these are cool, diverse outcomes. Greece will be different no matter what happens, even if I don't play Greece. I like that. That is good content right there. Greece also benefits from the free update to its content covered in 155, and later is one of the nations forming the Balkan League. Perhaps you will turn on your erstwhile allies to restore Byzantium. Certainly, Greece stands to benefit from a certain crisis to the east, which we are now going to be talking about. The Eastern Crisis. Our next hill is the peak of the Eastern Crisis, which faced the Ottoman Empire in the 1870s, leading to war with Russia, the 1878 Treaty of Berlin, and the release of Bulgaria. Uprisings were nothing new in the Ottoman Empire, but after raising taxes to cover the debts used to modernize infrastructure and reform the navy, the third biggest in the world in 1875, an unprecedented wave of revolts sprung up in the Balkan territories. The brutality of the Ottoman response, especially to the April uprising of 1876, published in the Western press as the Bulgarian horrors and the crime of the century, severely harmed Ottoman relations with the British. The below flavor text is a historical quote from the time, though in our game such an event can occur after cutting down any separatist movement right there. Okay, newspapers across the world are reporting about war crimes committed by our soldiers during our recent conflict with the Greek rebels. There's a context here that I want to add that intuitively I think people aren't aware of, but it makes a lot of sense the more you think about it. This is the period of the very first mass formalization of rules for virtually everything. When it comes to commerce, when it comes to the treaties related to war crimes, indeed, when it comes to the Red Cross, when it comes to all of these things, those are results of this period. They started to spin off, become more important, and so on. Now, in reality, this means that you now have the very first kind of consciousness when it comes to this topic. Obviously, horrors are something that people were conscious of and were always kind of against, if it was against people that they were either sympathetic to, or at the very least that they didn't see as their enemies. But the reality is that the formalization puts this at the forefront of now emerging mass politics. When we are looking at these treaties, we, for example, have also the very famous quotes, at least, well, I find them very famous. They had new treaties related to what can you do in a blockade? What can you do in an embargo? What can you do when you are in full control of the ports of your enemy? And this is actually quite interesting. The question came up, of course, related to World War I, related to the Germans. And the British Admiralty essentially said, I will not be losing a war because I had to leave, go through the blockade into Germany. I will not be looking at the British Empire falling apart for this reason. And this is also something that correlates to these treaties directly. This is really cool. I like the idea that Britain, in particular, going to see it, is going to see a bit of a blowback there should the Ottomans choose to do it, because the British were one of the major driving forces in establishing all of these treaties. There is an internal dissonance between the Admiralty, for example, and the diplomats, but the diplomatic body of the British was incredibly invested in these type of treaties. And this, of course, again stems from mass politics now being one of the first that actually taking place here, or rather it is one of the first periods in which mass politics really is taking place. So this is something that on the popular level, on the diplomatic level, plays a big role. On the military level, people will do what it takes to win a war. The number of children killed in these massacres is something enormous. They were often spitted on bayonets, and we have several stories from eyewitnesses who saw the little babes carried about the streets, both here and Olukni, on the points of bayonets. Yeah, I do remember that story, basically. They are horrific lies. You gain infamy. Publicly hang Mehmet Ali Pasha for these crimes, right? You kill him. The armed forces don't like it. This is literally what I was talking about in the way that the armed forces were thinking about this. Ottoman infamy increased by 15. Our contacts in Great Britain will vouch for us. This is where Britain basically goes. You have this dissonance that exists in British society, the diplomatic reality of it, and so on. The next rebels will get it much worse. This is you going, next time it's going to be you. Ottoman infamy increased by 50. Ottoman Empire gets terrified dissidents, and this is pretty good. I mean, it's a pretty good modifier. If the infamy penalty here seems harsh, note that the British government had a policy of protecting the Ottoman Empire against Russian advances, and it was largely due to the Ottomans' horrific reputation after these war crimes that England did not intervene during the Russo-Turkish War in 77-78. In-game, the Eastern Crisis journal entry has similar effects to the Springtime of the People covered by my colleague Victoria last week. An added difficulty, however, is that the Empire's subjects will receive 0.35 weekly liberty desire, amongst other benefits, because it isn't the internal population necessarily, which it is, of course, for SOTP. Instead, it is your subjects rising up against you. A developing crisis. The future of the Ottoman Empire is at a crossroads. A growing number of secessionist political movements threaten the stability of our nation. Right, so this is where it starts. Then you get the journal entry. This will run, okay, apparently for 9 years. A crisis is brewing in the Balkans, and we must maintain control over our territory as secessionists jeopardize Ottoman rule before the situation becomes dire. This current uptick of unrest needs to be stabilized before it spreads across the region. While the Great Eastern Crisis is ongoing, all cultural and religious political movements will draw even more support. Romanian integrity has reached 100%. So you can complete this if you manage to figure that out. Let's see how this works. The following conditions increase Romanian integrity: high legitimacy, not being at war, does not have any growing political movements that are secessionists, and is not in a current secession, or rather actually has recently crushed a secession. Okay. If time runs out, a crisis unchecked, and you go getting cooked. Waves of discord, yeah, people will join massively and then they will start breaking you up. Each subject also gets a massive boost, and the tech spread for military, that's pretty significant. Rebels may be the least of the Ottoman concerns, however, as Russia also will receive a journal entry encouraging them to liberate Bulgaria and seize Kars. Right, the crisis wrecking the Ottoman Empire has granted us an opportunity. I will say, and I was thinking about this, Johan actually was mentioning this in the EU5 Discord. Let me leak the internals here. No. He was discussing why he prefers situations so much, right? I did a video as well where I, of course, was talking about this, how I'm like, I think situations are a good mechanic. When I look at this, I don't think there is a way around this. And I have thought this now for a long time in the context of Victoria 3 in particular. Victoria 3 has very, very ambitious content designers, very talented content designers. But their content compound container, so in which way can a content be delivered in a coherent, sticking together type fashion, is very, very limited. You have journal entries, that is the primary way of doing it. You have general kind of events. But when we look at stuff like Springtime of the Peoples, that is delivered to all countries in a particular sphere, that would do better being a situation. This crisis and opportunity, obviously it is nice that it corresponds directly to the content block that, of course, the Ottomans are getting here for Russia, but this should be a situation that outside powers, including Russia, can make, indeed, you know, kind of the situation theirs. I would love it if Victoria 3 also got a general container of content that they can utilize for this, because this would slot in there so nicely. SOTP would slot in there so nicely. Balkan League would slot in there so nicely. Any content for China would slot in so nicely into that. The German Confederation would slot into this. I think situations and international organizations, Victoria 3 should definitely consider it. I get what they are doing here. I think it would be nice if there was a different container that changes it so that visibility for everybody is a given. How will I know that Russia has this journal entry, right? If there was a situation I could look at and I could see the potential actors, it would be a lot better. Meanwhile, should Russia make their play, Austria is unlikely to stand idly by. They too, if they have an interested lobby, will receive a journal entry encouraging them to join the fray and seize control of Bosnia. See, if there was a situation, having a lobby should unlock certain points, you know, certain buttons that allow you to do things. I think it would add so much, because these journal entries are nice, but visibility is hindered. Being aware of what the intentions of the other country are is hindered, because how will you be able to tell until they act it out, since this is something that only they see? That's all I'm saying. I'm going to skip over these. It's pretty straightforward. They have their own interests. They want to kind of go ahead with this, right? The Bosnian question, of course, indeed. This is a bit of a colony, I suppose, of the Austrians there. They want to build their own state, nation building in that vicinity there. This is cool content. I just wish that there was a different container. Should the Ottoman player survive this gauntlet of rebellion and warlike neighbors, they will be rewarded for their efforts, though perhaps the greatest reward is survival itself. Yeah, it doesn't seem that massive, but obviously getting out of it and getting rid of this pressure here from Austria and Russia is going to be success alone. Should the Ottoman Empire fail to keep Romanian integrity, see screenshot further above, together within 10 years, expect the crisis effects to continue, slowly fading away over the next decade. And here we then have one of the potential consequences of this not working out. Bulgaria, Prussia of the Balkans. In 1836, the nation of Bulgaria finds itself in the sorry position of not even having a hill to die on, for they aren't yet back on the map. Would you be inclined to remedy this? There are a couple of ways you can go about it. The quickest and easiest way, of course, being to simply start as the Ottomans and release Bulgaria as an independent nation. Alternatively, you may opt into either provoking a Bulgarian secession and siding with a subsequent rebellion, or liberating Bulgaria as Russia, which will fire a new event that allows you to switch to the young Bulgarian nation afterwards, amongst other options. Right, I getcha. Prussia of the Balkans right there. The Bulgarian revival. The independence of Bulgaria has exposed cracks in the Ottoman sphere. We have gained a fortuitous opportunity to expand a sphere of influence in the Balkans. Perhaps an extended stays in order to change players actively controlled country from Russia to Bulgaria. Okay, so you can basically facilitate this and then hop in. Bulgaria has at last become an independent nation. Who should rule us through the turmoil of change into a prosperous future? Support the Tsar's nephew, support Ferdinand, so this is the historical king. No kings will choose a man of the people, or an untainted and unknown voice will lead the choir. Upon independence, Bulgaria will have to face its first choice on whether to declare a monarchy or to pursue the path of republicanism. Depending on when the above event takes place, you may have one or several historical candidates as an option, including a monarchy led by either Alexander von Battenberg or Ferdinand von Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, as well as a republic under Stefan Stambulov. They are also generic fallback options for either a monarchy or a republic, should none of the historical candidates be available at the time. While this nation has now been liberated, its sovereignty is by no means secured, and the Ottomans will not go down without a fight. If that wasn't enough, rival claimants in the Balkans can be found in any direction, competing with Bulgaria for control over their shared homelands. To deal with the looming threat, Bulgaria will have to establish a formidable army to defend its borders and stake its claims, which finally leads us to the Prussian of the Balkans journal entry. This yet again, you have a bar that you want to fill. If you fill this, you get all these benefits. Indefinitely 100 prestige, that is actually a massive amount of prestige. You get for 20 years, that is massive. I mean, it decays, fair enough, but that is massive. Army, offense, and defense, Jesus, those are modifiers, okay? To complete this journal entry, one will have to engage in a process of rapid militarization, juggle the needs of the civilian economy with those of the army to become the uncontested powerhouse in the Balkans. Of course, having a huge army means nothing if you're not willing to use it, which brings us to the event that will fire upon successful completion of the journal entry and militarization process. Prussia of the Balkans. To Tsarigrad we march, Yugoslavia, or we are good, we're just gonna be internal. If you pick this option, stop playing Bulgaria, okay? Tsarigrad gives you claims on all of this. This is a nice looking Bulgaria. We have created a third Bulgarian empire. Makes sense. Now, the next thing, I just think the color is awful. I just think the color is hideous, okay? I will say, I'm seeing, in all of these screenshots, I am seeing a lot of AI activity. I'm seeing the Greeks, I'm seeing Austria here. That's really good. I like that a lot. Okay. Alternatively, one may perhaps embrace the inner Yugoslav and seek out a unified nation for all Slavs of the Balkans. Choosing this option, unsurprisingly, enables the ability to form Yugoslavia, which Bulgaria is otherwise barred from. Look at this color and tell me it looks good, okay? It's just knockoff Italy. What happened? This is the Italian color in Hearts of Iron 2. What's going on? Should you form Yugoslavia as Bulgaria, you will not only retain your Bulgarian primary culture in addition to all the other Yugoslav cultures, you will also be greeted with a new map color and unique set of flags. I like getting additional, levels of cultural acceptance, primary culture. I'm not gonna do this with this color. I'm gonna be Bulgaria. This is a good color. I like that color, okay? Although, I like this flag a lot. I think the flag is really cool. This is the beginning of Bulgarian Renaissance, is what you do when you are boring. Alright, let's move on to the Balkan League. As Ottoman power went downhill, pun very much intended, their ex-subjects saw an opportunity to band together in an effort to recover the rest of their homelands, a summon they seemed very much willing to die upon. The Balkan League, an alliance of Montenegro, Serbia, Greece and Bulgaria, waged the First Balkan War in 1912, successfully conquering most of the Ottoman Empire's remaining European territory. 1912 is fairly late game in terms of Victoria 3. We have designed the Balkan League content to be more generalized to accommodate for the cuts and tears that you, dear player, may have cut through the tapestry of history. At any point, if the 4 historical members of the League, provided they are on the map at that time, are all free from subjecthood, and the Ottomans are in the Eastern Crisis or at war with a great power, the League can form. I want to yet again say one thing. If this was an international organization, it would be nice. Okay? It would be really nice. It could be flexible. The outcomes could... This is not me going, the content designers of Victoria 3 are screwing up at all. This is me saying, Dan Lind, Martin Anwar, if you are hearing this, save us. Give us salvation if you can hear this, okay? Because you need code support for this. If there's anybody working on the engine, if there is time, having international organizations, I'm not talking the exact same concept of EU5, but the concept in terms of content delivery would be insane. This, obviously, it works, yeah, you can figure it out, but the visibility of this, the when does it trigger, where does it go, yada yada yada, there could be so much more. Having something that is inter-tag and actual interconnectivity, it's visible, it would be awesome. Let's talk about how it works right now, however. The Balkan League. We have been offered the opportunity to become a member of the Balkans Alliance against the Ottoman Empire. A unified army with a singular purpose may be the only means to banish them from the region once and for all. Montenegro will answer the call. Let's take a look. The following countries have established the Balkan League. See, this should be an international organization. In our testing, we generally find that these nations have a much harder time against the Ottoman Empire than they did historically. Thus, we have added a few tools for the smaller nations to stand a chance. Everybody should be able to click this for everybody. Listen, I'm not even saying anything. This is nice. I like the window of opportunity. This is interesting design. This means you have to act. This is an alliance that can kind of squander its opportunity if you were to fail it. If completed, end of an era, spoils of war, the Balkan states will be partitioned once the Ottoman Empire is completely eradicated from the region and they currently own. How is it determined what I get of this? You get dedicated military research, okay, this helps you speed up. Expanding the League, this allows you to add Ottoman subjects as allies in the upcoming war. However, first, you will need to support them with a support independence treaty. This is fine, I like this, that is cool, but it should be an international organization type of thing that you can ever, you know, whatever. Overwork arms industries, making your workers work until they drop is not good for their health, though it is great for making the weapons that you will need to provide to your troops. Not sure how vital this will be. I guess if you don't have a coast, right? Muster conscripts, these nations were famously dedicated to the war effort. Once the war starts, players may pull men from the fields to increase their conscriptable battalions and training rates, though there is some risk your forces starve if you haven't prepared accordingly. You can also resign and leave behind if you want to, leave the League behind if you want to. Otherwise, it is time to start the war. So this is this button right there that you want to be clicking sooner rather than later. Starts a special diplomatic play against the High Port. All Balkan League members will join our side. As of now, Ottoman Empire and their allies have an army power projection of 4.05k, while the Balkan League and their allies total 367, Jesus Christ. If we win, they will lose ownership of any owned states in the Balkans. Winning this war without the intervention of a great power on our side will grant us an additional reward. I getcha, okay. One could see if any great powers are supporting the independence of Ottoman subjects, in which case you may be able to bring them to your side by inviting said subject to the League. For example, here Wallachia's independence was guaranteed by Russia. After also guaranteeing their independence and adding them to the League, it looks like our side now has a chance, right? Obviously, because Russia is actually gonna be joining. The war begins. On behalf of all Balkan League members, Wallachia has officially announced the preparation of war to reclaim all Ottoman Empire lands in the Empire. Yeah, look at this. How does it select it? To return their homelands or independence. What if several countries share homelands? Sweet victory. Let's talk about this. Historically, before the First Balkan War had even been concluded, tensions between the allies began to chafe. There were disagreements as to who should receive which newly conquered hills and how much to honor pre-war agreements. It wasn't long before Bulgaria, which had only been a nation again for 35 years, found itself at war with the rest of the Balkan League. The events of the Second Balkan War were the inspiration for the Spoils of War journal entry. Basically, if you don't own all of your homelands, you're going to be wanting to push it. I gotta be honest with you, if the container of content delivery here was a different one, you could do something much more sophisticated. Right now, it seems pretty random who gets to get their territory. If it wasn't random, but instead I had a pool in the international organization where I can send my diplomats to, and these diplomats get to say, this land is ours, and if I have more investment in land, then I get that land. That's kind of better, right? That would be nicer. The content designers, as far as I'm concerned, are doing what they can do here, okay? They are in a position where you don't have any other container that you can put this content into. But I would love it if something this complex didn't need to live in journal entries. I think journal entries are okay, not for this content though. They need to have something more comprehensive. Dan Lind, studio director and game director, Martin Almond, if you can hear me, bring us salvation, add international organizations and situations. I think they could benefit a lot from this in many, many ways if they had those containers. Next week, we're going to have art. Really looking forward to this. They are also sourcing actually their stuff. I love it, Victoria. Thank you so much for putting all this stuff down here. Now, I will tell you outright that I won't be actually looking into any of these sources. I believe you when you say that you read them, because this content and everything where I do know the history clearly screams that the developers behind this love the history behind it as well. Now, if Victoria were to ever die, she would like it if she died in a comfortable armchair several minutes after completing the last incomplete book in her collection. This is the closest that she may come to fulfillment. I wish to die in the anti-McDonald's wars of 2029, where we rise up because they have denied us, basically, the burgers of the people, the common food of the common man and the common woman. We have to fight in that rebellion, and that is justice right there. So, I will see you in those wars. For now, let me know what you think about the flavor right here and about my particular kind of input, I guess, related to how this content could be delivered if they had bigger tools. Either way, I'm really looking forward to this patch. Folks, I will see you later. Alligator.